So just to give you a sense of who I am, I'm educated here at St. John's, taught chemistry, and I'm in this role 17th year as Abbot. It's one of those kinds of questions about. So I'm elected until I'm 75. I was 51 when I was elected. I'm 68 now. So you can do the math, huh? But you know how dicey this is, That is, you don't want to stay too long. That is at what point am I no longer effective? So I did a real gut check about 3 years ago on that. Just stepped away and just said, do it, figure it out. And brought in some external means of figuring it out. And the community was very strongly supportive at that point. But there's another piece, and that is one of my solemn duties is to make sure that there is a solid pool of candidates, or a pool of solid candidates, put the descriptor in the right place there, solid candidates who could be candidates going forward. That would be really, really important.
So you can step down before 75, but you're elected until age.
One of the ways that I've stayed sane in this role is by saying to myself and promising myself from the get-go that if the community ever said to me, John, you should really step down, I would do so. Like now, huh? Okay. And on the other hand, if I woke up for a number of days in a row saying, I can't do this another day, then it would be time, huh? So, both sides of that equation, I think, are important for someone in this kind of extended role. I did include some of this stuff here, but we captured a good amount of this stuff. But there, just in terms of being raised on a dairy farm, you say, well, okay, that's nice. What's helpful to me in my role is there's a fundamental problem-solving set of skills that comes with that. Because from the time you're this high, you're having to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Here, take this pail, feed those calves, okay? And I was the oldest, okay? So working with farm equipment, it's broken. What's wrong with it? Figure it out, okay? There's some real kind of, and I say that not in a bragging sense, it's part of the gift of that particular ambiance, huh? That's a word you won't hear in El Rosa, okay? Okay. Yeah. I wanted to say something. I give you this handout here, not because I necessarily want to expect you to read it, okay? But I wanted to give you a sense of what this rule of Benedict is and how it fits into the Christian tradition and how to date it. I would have brought the rule along, but I got a little bit spacey on the way here. But it's a tiny little book. It's 100 pages long. You can read it in 2 hours. So we're not talking about a tome. We're talking about a distillation based on the Gospels and both the scriptures of the Jewish people and the Christian people, okay? Just to give you a date, huh? So when you talk about a Benedictine place, huh? And named after Saint Benedict, we date his birth to 480 AD. So an easy mnemonic here, 1980 was the 1500th anniversary of his birth. And we normally peg his date at 547. So, he's early to mid 6th century in terms of the monastic tradition that comes from him. It's Italy. okay? Not to insult your intelligence, okay, but where does he live? That's Italy, okay? And you know, Nursia is where he was born. It's about 3 hours north of Rome. Monte Cassino is where he had founded a monastery, and it's about 90 minutes south. So you get a sense for where those places are, and it's right in that kind of country. Benedict doesn't, of course, you know, we kind of can imagine like it drops straight out of the heavens, huh? Not at all, okay? He is not at all a monastic founder in the same kind of order as, for example, St. Francis is, who truly invents a new way of religious life within the Catholic tradition, okay? But in fact, what he's doing is taking 200 years of monastic tradition in the East and in the West, in Egypt and in the West, and really distilling it down into a very succinct kind of statement for the organization of a religious community and a religious life. Okay, and that's what we're about. Okay, but so these are some of the names, and I simply to kind of give you a sense of what the spread is. St. Anthony in the Desert is, dates of, the middle of the 3rd century. Pachomius in Egypt is, the end of the 3rd century and 4th century. St. Augustine, of course, and his rule is dated typically at 400. So you get a sense for these are the major influences. And of course, right up front and at the top is the Bible. I mean, the rule of Benedict is fundamentally, it's a biblical document. It's a way of living out of the scriptures. And we swim in scripture all the time. So, in terms of our life each day, and I just point to this text in particular, the Matthew passage here, come into the kingdom. I was hungry and you gave me some food. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, etc. These texts are just embedded in the rule of St. Benedict throughout it. So a very strong sense of commitment to a social gospel and social accountability. Receiving guests and being hospitable, okay? Taking care of the needs of the poor. Very, very important within the context of the rule itself. Okay? Who we are today, and Don mentioned this here, we were crisscrossing here. So the prep school and middle school, 260 students here, boys and girls, okay? The undergraduate college, about 1725 men on this campus, closely allied with the College of St. Benedict in a what's called a coordinate relationship. So we have a unified curriculum. They have about 3,800 students. So it's pretty, 1850, so that the total is about 3,900, okay? Thank you for that. Oh my goodness, they really grew a lot. Okay? So just a misspoken number there, okay? Unique in the country, really. So we have 2 presidents, 2 boards of trustees, but 1 curriculum, 2 campuses, women living there, men living here, but a lot of things jointly, but student development stuff we do separately. Okay? School of Theology and Seminary, about 75 to 80 students, full-time equivalent in that. And it's a seminary, so we have about 15 to 20 students typically who are studying theology towards ordination as clergy. Most of them are either canons or monastics. Okay. So, and then the Lit Press, a publisher of books, mostly theological, liturgical, scriptural commentaries, as well as liturgical aids and assistance. Okay? So, other important elements, though, I would be amiss if I didn't talk about these. Certainly, the Collegeville Institute is a very, very important element of the Abbey mission. We've been for a long, long time as a monastery, been committed to ecumenical dialogue between Christian churches. And the institute, which Don heads as executive director, is really a strong, powerful extension of that mission commitment, okay? The J. Phillips Chair, which has now gone into another form, but nevertheless, about 1965, the university here, with the strong support of the J. Phillips family, set up a chair in Jewish studies on this campus, okay? Monastic interreligious dialogue. Back in the time of Paul VI, he charged monastic communities with the mission of actually reaching out and doing interreligious dialogue with Buddhists, with the Jewish people, with Hindus, with Muslims, but to really reach out and develop that core set of skills, because the monastic tradition and living in a religious community with that monastic core tends to have, if you will, the ability to reach out and connect on the level of practice. On the level of practice. So it's a matter of, we're not going to start talking about doctrine. We're going to talk about how to, so what happens when you try to meditate? Well, there's something to talk about, okay? So monastic interreligious dialogue, in fact, William Skillard, one of our monks, is now the general secretary for the interreligious dialogue on a global level, okay? And the Episcopal House of Prayer, one of those wonderful gifts that's on this campus here. Bishop Anderson and Abbot Tyson in the 1980s were very good friends and hatched this idea and came up with, after sorting out the issues and working really hard and praying really hard, ultimately we're able to build this retreat center and place for reflection and gathering for Episcopalians, but a host of others as well. So it's been a wonderful, if you will, work in applied ecumenism, okay?
And you all will be introduced to the Episcopal House of Prayer when you come to the Institute during the summertime. So you'll see that building. One of you has already been down there, so.
So what is monastic life, huh? It's community, huh? We're about 120 monks, not all of them are here, 100 are here. We make a commitment to have a community of goods, so we don't own cars. We have cars available. We dine together. Most importantly, we pray together. We celebrate sacraments together, Eucharist and other sacraments. But that life of prayer is a very, very important part of our day, each day. And it's one of the things that, for example, makes conversation with Muslims something that works, because again, the Muslim community believes in really doing prayer at specific times of the day, okay? And did I just do something? I went back, sorry about that. So it's truly communal. And, not every day is a holiday because you're married to me, huh? Okay? And community life isn't always this wonderful, joyous experience. But on most days, it's pretty good. Do you know what I'm saying? That is, it has its trials. There's a variety of characters and a variety of judgments and comments about how things should get done and the way we're doing it, and why aren't we doing it some other way, etc. Okay? So all the things that you can imagine from your own community experiences, they're with us, alive and well, because it's a very, on the one hand, pitched very high in terms of religious goals, in terms of the way we want to live with each other, and yet at the same time, we're really human. A strong, incarnational spirituality. Saint Benedict in writing the rule provides for some things that really make community work. That's what this slide is. How does community really work? I mean, it's easy to use that word community, and it's kind of like Philadelphia cream cheese. You just spread it over everything, huh? You know, and what you have is schlock, okay? But in fact, here are some things that really make it work, okay? That is the abbot is charged to call, when there are serious issues, to call the whole community together for counsel. When there are minor issues, to call a portion of the community of seniors. The community elects the prioress at St. Ben's. They have a monastery of women, just like men here. So they have 200 women at St. Ben's, St. Benedict's monastery, okay? And their leader is called a prioress. So like, you know, the abbot or prioress is actually elected by the community, and in doing so, Benedict really breaks with the rule that he's using in front of him, the rule of the master, and retrieving something absolutely fundamental. Absolutely fundamental. You can know that and sense immediately that if the community elects the abbot, and you're acting out of a sense of trust and care with that community, that ultimately you can make some really hard decisions at times. And by golly, people might not like it, but ultimately they'll work with you. Okay? So and that's vitally important. The abbot or Benedict delegates genuine spiritual authority to other figures within the monastery. And that's extremely important. So in other words, other individuals in the community have genuine spiritual authority. Okay? Coming together. He says, whatever you do, stop murmuring. Okay? Okay? Chapters, I point to these. They're two brilliant chapters. 2 and 64. 64 is the one that provides for the actual election process in the verses. And then the latter part of the chapter is describing Benedict's own description of what kind of person the community should be looking for in terms of the role of leadership as a spiritual leader. You know, someone who is able to be kind of more or less even-keeled, not dead, but even-keeled, huh? You know, able to handle complicated situations and stay calm. Huh? Who will make sure that he loves the brothers, but hate faults, and not be afraid to root them out and correct them. At the same time, correct in such a way that in scraping the rust off the vessel, it doesn't ruin the vessel. Okay. That kind of nuance. Okay. Someone who is able to understand and work with a variety of characters. Again and again, the abbot is instructed that, you know, there are some characters that are just pretty rude, and you got to be pretty direct with them. And there are others who are smart and quick on the uptake. They're flexible. They're paying attention, and he can be more gentle with them. Huh? Okay. So that kind of, if you will, awareness of the individual characteristics of the group of human beings who are in the community. The abbot should be aware of his own frailty. So, in other words, the longest chapter in the rule is the chapter on humility. Okay, and I gave it to you, okay? I mean, it's a scary chapter. I mean, if you have a background in psychology, good luck, okay? But if you're reading it from a scriptural point of view, and it's from the biblical point of view, it will make complete sense. I mean, it's coming out of that tradition. So you need to read it from a scriptural point of view and not from a psychological point of view. But in other words, here, to get back to where I was going with this, the Abbot is to operate and work out of a stance of humility, just like everybody else. And that is a real sense of self-awareness. And what do I need to be aware of in myself? You know, what am I bringing into this conversation with an individual? Okay. Yeah, the good of order. The Abbot is instructed again and again and again to set up processes that will allow the community to operate in such a way that it's not always in a state of turmoil and confusion and anxiety, but rather things should be so ordered that there's a kind of anticipatory rationality in the life of the monks, that they know what to expect so that they can do what? So that they can go about the business of seeking God. That's the bottom line. So they can go about the business of seeking God and really growing in union with God. So that's that again, that very high purpose. And finally, I didn't put it here, but the Abbot is warned constantly, maybe at least 20 times, that he should be aware that he will have to render an account in the last analysis. And it's not to the neighbor, it's to God. Okay, so a really strong sense of spiritual accountability for that leader. Okay, I hope I'm tracking here, not using interstellar language. If I am, please interrupt me. You know, I have no need to drive down any section of road here. Okay. So this is making sense. Okay. So there are some big chapters, 5, 6, and 7 on obedience, silence, humility, and this is the kind of the absolute core of monastic teaching. They're the glue that hold things together. You can imagine that something like silence within the monastic life here. I'm going to start there because I think it's the one that's most intuitive to you. You know, in terms of being attentive, being mindful of what's going on, few things could be more dear, more relevant to us as within the community than having the skill set for being comfortable with silence. The way we do our monastic prayer here reflects that commitment. So when we start out, you know, we do the hymn, we start out, we sit, we're quiet. And the reason, it's not because we've lost our place. It's precisely because we want to kind of gather ourselves. And then we put in a minute between each of the psalms. And again, it's just to just slow it down. It functions almost as a break on a rapid, modern, intense life. Okay. After a scriptural reading, 2 minutes. Okay. Saturday, once a month, we have a full day of silence in the monastery. And it's meant to, again, to call us into that reflection. We try to pay attention to silence after, say, 9 or 9:30 at night until after morning prayer. So it's quiet in the monastery, okay? We zip it, okay? We no talking at breakfast, okay? At the evening meal, we have silence during the first 15 minutes for the reading, etc. And then we have conversation. So we're trying to balance that need for silence and the fact that we're social beings. And we don't work together anymore like we used to. You know, I mean, when we used to have 10 guys working in the barns here, With the dairy herd, well, I mean, they saw each other all day. Do they need to talk? No. But now that's not true anymore. Because everybody's all over, huh? We got people at prep school, we got people in the press, people in the university, people in the shops, people in, et cetera. So we're much more split up than we used to be. All of these things here in terms of reading, pondering, Lectio Divina, that is taking a chunk of scripture each day and really sitting with it and spending time with it, reading, journaling on it, and then being contemplatively silent is a very, very important part of what we're about. Delegation. Okay, I was just trying to give you some sense, if you have no connection necessarily to a monastic environment, what that life would be like and what we'd be trying to do and how we'd be trying to do it. Okay, so that's fundamentally it. Deans of the monastery. Benedict loves deans. Groups of 10 monks, a person in charge, acting as a kind of, if you will, middle-level spiritual counselor, guide, a companion, etc., etc., etc. Very, very important. Gives them spiritual authority. The cellar or treasurer of the monastery. Someone who makes sure, takes care of the vegetable garden. Make sure that the bread gets baked each day and that each monk gets a pound loaf of it. Make sure that the wine isn't going sour. Make sure taking care of the physical needs of the community members. Beautiful, beautiful chapter 31, okay? Just gorgeous. The formation director, again, the person who walks with or accompanies individuals who are joining the community. And again, they're given genuine spiritual authority. You choose the person who, in fact, you think will be able to be a good, helpful companion for the individuals who are coming into the community. Okay? You can see immediately why that would be important. Okay? The guest master, someone who, in fact, embodies hospitality, who knows how to receive guests, who knows how, on the one hand, to take care of their needs, but not to be so troubling and insertive that he's pestering them. Whose needs are being met here? Precisely that sensibility in terms of an awareness of the poor and awareness of things, taking good care of the guest house. Okay? The prior of the monastery. Well, the prior is the second in command. Okay? Benedict doesn't like priors. Okay, so if you want to see Benedict, if you want to read a chapter in which Benedict kind of loses it, okay? I mean, we expect him to be like this, right? Huh? This is just, huh? So, he must have had a really bad experience with the prior. That's my hunch. Nevertheless, all Benedictine monasteries since Benedict have had priors. Because in fact, that's the way the organization needed to change. So I'm thinking that what we're seeing in the rule itself is we're getting a snapshot of something that's in transition, okay? Specifying processes. How important this is if you're going to have a rational, sane community, huh? That is provides a process for electing the abbot. So that, there won't be any futzing around with it, huh? This is what we're doing. This is how we do it, okay? Sorry. Accepting processes for accepting a new member into the community. And the structure and the words that you are actually speaking when you make vows, when you make profession, okay? Spends a whole bunch of time from chapters 8 to 20 laying out in gory detail the way you should say the Psalms. How the office, the prayer should be organized. Gets to the end of it and says, but if you think you can figure it out better, you're free, please do so. Okay? So on the one hand, gives you the detail, but then says, if you need to change it. Disciplining monks for chapters 23 to 30 and 43 to 46 are, monks who are in trouble. What should be how should the abbot respond? Again, it's not cookie cutter, it's not at all detailed. And you look at it, you say, does he really have a system? And you'd have to say no. But he provides for levels and levels of response, so that the more serious something is, the stronger the response. But ultimately, the judgment call is left in the hands of the abbot, unfortunately. It'll come to you on the road, okay? Processes for food and drink, service, clothing, all those things. Again, some detail, but not so much that future generations couldn't make the adaptations. So repeatedly, Benedict will say to the abbot and to the community, look, this is what we're recommending. However, if local conditions require you to do something else, do it. I would say that over the last 1,500 years, more communities have failed to take those instructions seriously than not, to the detriment of the order. And that is to really say, look, we really need to make an adjustment here. The nightmare is what? That we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That we're sliding down this slippery slope, and then we'll end up with something that's no longer really monastic. That's the nightmare. So that provides a conservative hedge to sometimes making the courageous adaptive change you need to make. Okay. Taking counsel, extremely important chapter. And again, I pointed to it before, and that is the Benedict says that the abbot should take counsel with either the whole community on big issues, or with a smaller group. Do not confuse this with democracy. It's not. The abbot is taking counsel. Taking counsel. So he's still ultimately instructed that he should make the decision. In this environment and in this country, we as a community probably vote on more things than any other community in the country. That is we really have a highly developed sense at St. John's here of the role of the chapter. So there are things, if I would just go ahead and willy-nilly just say, well, I think I'll just post a sign on the board and say, I have decided, it would not be a good day in Collegeville. Okay, it would not be a good day.
Abbot John, this slide and the earlier one, it strikes me, they're about transparency, leadership and transparency and the importance of it, so that people aren't totally surprised by, or you're not holding your cards to your vest. There's a process, there are procedures, everybody knows them, so that they can buy into them, they know that they're there.
Exactly.
As opposed to a leader who surprises people all the time. Is that accurate?
That would be absolutely spot on, and it's a very, very good word to use, transparent. So that, because with the transparency comes trust. So that if you do make a mistake, you can say, wow, I just blew it. I shouldn't have done that, and I did it. And I did it for these reasons, but it was a mistake, okay? If you're trustworthy in the other situations, people will take that. But if in fact there's a whole trail of lack or instances of transparency, of non-transparency, then you're in trouble.
Abbot,
Yes,
I would
please.
be curious, what would you say has been the greatest challenge that you have faced during your tenure here?
Greatest challenge that I faced here is the sad history of St. John's Abbey, monks from the past who have been involved in the sexual abuse of minors. So we've had a number of lawsuits and cases, very, very painful outcome for individuals harmed. So responding to that and trying to do so in a way that's both pastoral, but also then responding to those individuals within the community and setting up, supervision plans and the other things, that has been, without a doubt, the most serious challenge I've faced. There have been others, but this is a long, sustained challenge that's been with me almost from the day I walked into this role, and is still there. Okay. Yeah. So building consensus, knowing how to do your homework on a proposal to bring it to the community, but to bring it to the community in such a way that it's still unfinished, so that it's not all zipped up. Because if it's all zipped up, what does the community say? Looks like everything's decided here. Do you just want us to rubber stamp it? So you need to go and bring it in at a stage. If it's too undone, the community will say, what'd you bring this junk here for? There's not a core idea that holds this thing together. Okay? So it needs to be at the right level so that in fact there can be community fingerprints all over it. And they can have at it. And you listen carefully, bring it back the next week, and you'll have almost a unanimous vote on it. That's not manipulative, but it is getting buy-in and moving it forward. Okay? But let me tell you, it is an art and not a science. Okay. And the chapter 3 concludes simply, take counsel and you will not be sorry afterwards. Leadership challenges. So you got out in front of me there, okay, but that's okay. Hospitality. This community had worked for over 25 years through the time of Abbot Jerome to articulate the need for a guest house. And a good number of community members were absolutely convinced we didn't need it. We have a press, we've got schools, we've got parishes. Huh? Who's going to do the work? And who are you going to serve? So it took a long time to sort through the issues. Timothy started it, and I was put in the blessed position of actually being able to bring this project to fruition. Okay, this would be an example of true, in the words of Ron Heifetz, in terms of technical change or adaptive change. This would be in the realm of adaptive change, in the sense of really transformative change. We had to reimagine ourselves as a community that had another apostolate, and that we had to be available in another way to respond to the people who were coming to the campus. Okay. We had to, until 2012, there was simply one corporation here, the Order of St. Benedict. But St. John's University is this huge, unwieldy part of that corporation. And it's in this incredible, sorry about that. I think I just went the wrong way. There it is. Close relationship with the College of St. Benedict. But they couldn't relate to each other because they were misaligned. The College of St. Benedict was its own corporation, and ours was part of our overall corporation. We also needed to really make sure that the Board of Trustees for the university really realized, hey, we really are in charge of this. We have full fiscal, legal responsibility for this university. So it took us a good chunk of time to do that creation of a new corporation. It took us about 7 years to do it. But we had to figure out and disentangle all of the relationships that had been built up over 150 years. Okay? So going all the way back to the beginning. And figure out how we as a community would still be engaged in a very dynamic way to that school and still have it be independent. So this was This is called heavy duty stuff. And my role in that was to not stick my nose in too soon, but to only, when they needed the abbot to say, I think we should do this, to do it. The Abbey did not have a development office before 2000. We had always said, look, let the prep school and university raise money. We're just going to be able to do it with what we have ourselves. We realized that if we were ever going to build a guest house, that we needed to ask people to help us do it. And so we had to create a development office. Not in competition with the Abbey, with the university or the prep school, but we needed to have one. We needed to be able to raise money to help us accomplish our mission. Okay? Appointing a vocation director. This is the person who is working with young people as they're coming in, and sometimes not so young people, who want to come and think about joining the monastic community. I couldn't find anybody that could do it all. And it was a real headbanger for a while, until I realized, wait a minute, the role had changed so much and required such a broad expanse of skill sets that no one person would ever have those skill sets. And that what I needed to do was to reimagine completely the way in which we were going to do that work. So sometimes you may face that exact kind of challenge in your own work. And typically, you become aware of it when you're trying to solve a basic problem and you can't solve it. And all of a sudden, I realized, wow, wait a minute, I've got to think about this in a very different way. So that's what I did. Okay? And then the meaning of the sexual abuse crisis for the community. How to pay attention to survivors and help them heal. How to deal with community as a whole. How to deal with those who in fact have offended. Okay. So, big, tough, demanding, emotionally and spiritually demanding work. Jeepers, I didn't realize I was going to continue on the challenges. Okay. So, concern for the spiritual life of the community. Always trying to make sure that I'm really tracking with the individuals in the community to say, you know, what do they need? What do they really need?
How do you do that?
Just by you really talking to a lot of people, both individually and in groups. And listening to community discussions, reading the newspaper, paying attention to what's going on the outside as well. Because in this role, I'm constantly engaging with the outside public, speaking in one way or another, listening, sitting at meetings, and trying to understand what I'm encountering. Knowing how to pace proposals in the community. That is, if you try to do too many things at the same time, your community can find itself being overwhelmed. Okay? Knowing how to grab a good idea and run with it. Maybe not be able to do it all in its entirety, but at least let's start. Let's figure out some small, wonderful way to start. Okay? Sometimes within the business world, people think, oh, you're the CEO. Yeah, this is not dissing CEOs, okay? They have a very specific role within corporate America, okay? Well defined. That's not what I am. It's just not what I am at all. Okay? And humility, huh? It may seem like something is in the breach. We tend to ascribe it to college football players. Nice, humble young man, okay? It's great, okay? Wow. But in fact, within a monastic environment, it's much more serious in terms of that kind of really deep self-awareness of who I am as a human being in need of God's mercy and kindness, and aware, first of all, of the gifts of the Holy Spirit that I need to really live out and work with, but then also where I need a lot of other people's help. And, you know, some of those things are right here. But there's a bunch of them that are right up here. And only you can see them. So I need you to tell me what they are. That's why I say that humility is ultimately also, ooh, what did I just do? A community project. I just came to the end, to the last slide. So, anyway, floor is open for your questions and observations, okay? God, I hope I didn't, this wasn't like stepping up to a fire hydrant to get a drink of water.
So out of curiosity, how do you do fundraising? How do you raise money? Or in addition to what you get in tuition from college?
So that's in another bucket,
Okay.
okay? It's just a totally separate enterprise. And in terms of tuition, and the university has its own fundraising and development for the library and other things, okay? Ourselves, we work with donors, individuals who care deeply about the monastery. We send out an annual appeal. We have a number of different ways of growing that database as well. So basically, it's a very different, it's a small, much smaller scale set of parameters that we have. It's a small shop, so it's not big. I don't know if that's helpful to you, okay? Yeah. But you know, friends of the Abbey, and we just reach out to people and ask them if they can help us a little bit. Sometimes if they know us well and they have more capacity, we might add. And of course, they're like any donor. They can say yes or no.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's specific to the Abbey?
That's specific to the Abbey. Yeah.
And is it just general, like year-to-year fundraising, or do you target it to projects?
Oh, both. So we were partnering with the university, and so it was an Abbey University campaign. So we were raising money to renovate the Breuer Monastery building, which is the monastery building right behind the Abbey Church. Okay, so it's a big project. So it's about $9 million. Okay, so we're talking serious dollars. We also were raising money. We fund a Benedictine volunteer corps, which is we send out about 20 St. John's University students each year to go to about 8 or 9 different sites, and so we raise the money each year to send them there. Okay. We were also raising money for health and retirement. Let's see, what else? Oh, we were trying to raise money for an endowment to help us take care of the forest. So this space here, this campus that you came onto, it's about 2,700 acres of land. It's a very large hardwood forest, which you really gotta work to maintain a hardwood forest, huh? That is you gotta be harvesting trees and you've gotta be planting trees. Most of us would think that oak trees wanna grow, huh? But there are creatures out there called deer who eat oak seedlings like bacon for breakfast, okay? So we have to burn, we have to fence, we have to work really hard to regenerate that forest, huh? So we were raising money for endowment for that, $2 million as an endowment, because right now it's taking about $75,000 to $80,000 a year right out of our current operating to do that work. Okay, that's tough.
Is it the monks doing that forest work?
Huh?
Is it the monks doing that forest work, or is that somebody that you hire?
No, we have to hire someone.
Okay,
Yeah.
wondering.
Well, I'd love to have a monk doing it. If you know someone. Thank you, Dasha. Dasha.
Quick question.
Yes.
The monastic life in general,
Mhm.
as it is today, has it changed over the course of the last many decades or centuries, or is the fundamentals still remain the same?
Great question. So I would say that the monastic life as it was lived in the Middle Ages up until about 1950 would have been more or less the same. But especially once it came through the monastic, through the Second Vatican Council from 1960 to 1964, in that time frame, the changes that came out of that. So in a moment, this community would have been praying the divine office, the morning and evening and all of the prayer, in Latin, and chanting it. And in a single stroke, that went away. All of a sudden we're praying in English. The community is. I wasn't there yet, okay? We're praying in English. But when I came to the community in 71, I mean, we had, literally since that time, we've had to develop a whole new musical repertoire of singing the Psalms in English. Okay? Before the Second Vatican Council, there were different communities within the community. So there were the monks who were not ordained, and they did not make solemn vows, final vows, and were not members of the chapter. They couldn't vote. Okay? And then there were the clerics, the priests, okay, and then there was the novitiate. And so now we really have one community. And all monks are monks once you're accepted for vows. Okay? So, you know, you literally overnight, non-ordained monks, you know, could go away to school. They could have major leadership positions within the community. They could do all the things that we do. Monks would have been here, boy, oh boy. They might have left the campus once a year, maybe twice a year, unless they were ordained, at which point they'd be going out to parishes. But there were no cars. You know? There was a train that came to the other side of the freeway, and if you were going to the cities, you would catch the train, or later on the bus. But there would have been, you know, until 1960, there would have been maybe just like one car. So that world has changed. Huh? Yeah. We were, 1958, on campus there would have been a herd of 70 cows. Beautiful Holstein cows. Wow. Awesome. Okay. And there would have been fields and haying. And there was on the other side of one of the back roads here, there was a big hog farm. Okay. So that produce, and there was chickens, huh? Laying eggs, and all of that. So there was, and the scale of the institution, of the schools, was such that all of that more or less fit together. But then when the university started to grow, and just, yeah, it just went in a very, very different direction. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about other things that changed. So some of the processes that I talked about in terms of the Abbot taking counsel, you know, back in the 30s and 40s, you know, the community would come into the chapter, they would not know what was on the agenda. With the council, you must publish an agenda before the meeting, okay? It has to be announced ahead of time, okay? Just so that that was no longer just something ritual. Taking counsel had real bite to it, huh? Okay. Yeah. And the schools, like all of our communities and all the institutions we have, they're big and complicated. And the institutions that we have here are big and complicated. That is, you know, in the time of Abbot Elkin, and he was abbot from 1921 to 1951, 30 years. My shoulders hurt thinking of it. Okay? He would regularly have, if students coming through the depression, they couldn't afford to come. And parents would come and say, you know, my son, he's smart, he wants to work really hard, we have no way to pay for it. And Abbot would interview the young man and say, okay, August 28th is the first day of school, come, we'll figure it out. And there might be 20 students like that. And about August 15, Alcuin would walk down to Martin Sherber's office, who was the dean, and say, oh, by the way, there are these 20 extra guys coming. Now, get them put them in a room and give them some good courses. Okay, that was the Abbey's financial aid package. Okay? So, yeah. So you see, so there, and so I'm saying that there are like 20 forces that are operating here that are changing. I mean, the monks got out of farming. Not only, well, first of all, they didn't have enough monks to do the work anymore. Secondly, it wasn't big enough to produce all the food that needed to be produced. Thirdly, the cow barn was right in the middle of the campus. If you've ever been in a cow yard and a cow barn, you realize that some days are better than others.
The challenge of growing the Abbey.
Yes.
Tell us about how you see that developing in this modern world.
In this modern world, okay. Great question again. It's a very challenging time for, I think, all communities of faith. All communities. So I have to say this in a non-whimpering tone, okay? But to say that I think that there are young people out there, when I say young, I mean between 25 and 35, or 25 and 40, who in fact would be good monks, and who would be really happy as monks. But the most important thing for us is to present ourselves to them in such a way that, in fact, we attract the right people who are truly able to live the life. So I am not interested in having a community of 300 monks again, even if it were possible. It's much more important for us to have a solid core of individuals who can really do it, and who are able to grow into that challenge and face the kind of ups and downs and all the things that happen to us as human beings in the course of our lives, whether we're in a monastery or not. So my goal as Abbot is to do the things that we need to do to keep our number, and to make sure that we're doing the right things and that we're not being stupid about attracting individuals to the community. On the one hand, just not doing enough and not devoting enough resources to it, or secondly, somehow closing our eyes and just hoping things will work out well when we take an individual who may or may not be able to make it.
Because to build on that, has it been easier for some reason for St. Benedict's to grow the monastery for the women? I mean,
it's more demanding and it's harder. It's the other way, because women have so many opportunities for them, and secondly, women's role within the Catholic environment is so hard. It's just so, it's not hospitable. And let's put it this way, a lot of young women and a lot of women, period, done, over, would say, wow, there's got to be a way we can be treated better in this institution than we are. So that complicates the situation for growing a women's Catholic monastery, I would say.
Are you doing I was gonna ask that one, but I'll ask a different one instead. Are you doing, is there anything being done to make life different for women who want a leadership role? Do you see any changes coming down the pipeline?
Well, it's my dear, deep hope that, for example, within the Catholic environment, that women will be able to be ordained deacons. I think that's a really important step. Secondly, juxtaposed with that, it's my deep hope that within the Catholic environment that lay ecclesial ministries and ministers will begin to have a canonically recognized relationship with the local bishop. So that there's a stronger relationship between lay men and women who are in ministry in their relationship to the local ordinary. I think that's a very, very important step. Yeah, I think the data just has to keep pounding hard on the bishops' conference because denial is so strong.
Where does deacon fall in the?
Oh, okay. Deacon, and then priest, and then bishop. Okay.
What can a deacon do?
What can a deacon can, so for example, officiate at a wedding. A deacon can preach on a regular basis. A deacon regularly serves brings communion and works with the community, people who are in the hospital, etc. And can do a variety of other leadership tasks within the community. Okay? But cannot celebrate Eucharist and cannot celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation, okay? Or anointing. I really wish that deacons could anoint as well, because I think that would be a really, really powerful presence within when people are very just need to be they need attention, sacramental attention. So, okay.
How does the church's relationship to the gay community affect the dynamic around the monastery?
You know, the church per se, depending on where you are within the Catholic environment, from diocese to diocese, it can vary dramatically in terms of the level of hospitality and welcome and trust between the local bishops and clergy and the LGBTQ community. Within the monastic community, it's simply a non-issue. It just doesn't, because our commitment is to live a chaste, celibate life. And so the most important question we're asking of individuals when they're coming into the community is, do you know who you are sexually? And if that person says, well, I'm really not sure, you're not ready. Okay? We need to know, we need you to know who you are. And that you're comfortable, if you're a gay man, that you're comfortable being gay. And that you're committed to being celibate and chaste. And if you're a heterosexual man or straight, the same is true. Okay? So, yeah, we just have and this would not just be true of us as monastics, this would be true of religious communities in general. I don't know, does that? Okay.
So could a gay man become a priest then? Or become
Yes. No, within some, that I hedged my bet here when I was speaking to Tim here. So within some dioceses, there can be a kind of a homophobia that operates such that within the seminary there can be some really strong and funny dynamics in terms of whether or not a young man may be thinking about priesthood, but he's trying to work out who he is, okay? Or there may be challenges along the way, but if he's not careful about dealing with them, he may find himself all of a sudden no longer invited to continue on the track to ordination. I would say that most dioceses, though, are stepping around that and saying, wait a minute, we've got to work with the human beings who are with us and help them figure out who they are and help them live the life. Yes?
How are you dealing with potential divisions, differences, political in nature? And how do politics come up? How do you counter that, preempt that, or react to it?
That's a great question again. Yeah. So I sent out a notice. I've had to do this a number of times, in September before an election, just to say, folks, we need to be extremely sensitive about political issues and the way that people have a right to be aligned with either presidential candidate or with and can take different positions on important political issues. We've got to have that freedom within the House. And to make that possible, you simply have to be very attentive to each other and, sensitive and avoid stereotyping. Avoid getting into heated debates where you're no longer able to be rational with each other, okay? We are overwhelmingly a liberal community here at St. John's, okay, in this monastery. So, and that would be true both in terms of the political place we end up in, but it would also be true theologically. We also have to have the same kind of sensitivity for individuals who are more traditional, for example, liturgically or theologically.
Or Stearns County.
Well,
Virtually the opposite of that, how you've described the monastery, isn't it?
I would say so, yes. I mean, in the outlying areas here, in terms of the last election, Hillary Clinton won the 7 counties of the metro, okay? Barely won the state of Minnesota. And the whole entire region of the rest of the state went for Donald Trump. So, exactly.
Theologically too, is Stearns County more conservative?
I would say that I could go to my home community and I could talk theologically there with very little difficulty. Yeah, they're not. I for the most part.
Is that a change?
No. Well, it could be, but I've never. I mean, there are pockets, and I know where those pockets are, where there are some real extreme conservative theological and spiritual positions taken, but I don't think that's characteristic. I think too many people have to navigate in the modern world and realize, oh my, we've got to make some, just putting up the walls isn't going to help us. I meant that metaphorically.
Who's going to
We
pay
gotta say
for it?
Ben's pay for it, right? Yeah.
You were going to
Yes, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the the shared goods of the community and that process of shared property, and maybe like why you do it, and to what extent does that do you own anything, so on.
Thank you for asking me to be granular, okay? So the ideal comes right out of the New Testament, right out of the Acts of the Apostles, that the goods were shared, and so that nobody was without food and the necessities of life, okay? That tradition out of the Acts, it comes right into the monastic tradition. And it's a powerful descriptor for what monastic communities have aimed for. In our time, it's very difficult, isn't it? So, I mean, that computer over there, that's a personal computer. I'm not sharing it with anybody. Okay? And could I? Well, really? No, I couldn't.
And you don't own it.
And I don't own it. But, I mean, it's purchased with the resources of the community, but in fact, it's for my use. It really is, okay? This mobile
Yes.
phone, huh? Okay? You know, it's likewise, it's very personal. But on the other hand, cars, so when the people need to go into town to go to a dental appointment or whatever, or need to go and visit their family, we have about 15 cars. And we have you sign up a couple of days ahead of time, and, or if you need desperately, if somebody needs, I'll say, take the car that's parked in the place where I have access to one. One of the perks of the Abbot, there aren't many, but this is one of them. I have a car for my use, and it's in a heated garage. And in a Minnesota winter, oh man. So we as a community, back in the 70s, made the decision with this many monks that each individual monk would come up with a budget for the year, say $1,500, say, to pick a number, okay? And, you know, like this much for vacation, so much for toiletries, so much for clothes, so much for et cetera, and it would be approved, and boom, you have access to that many dollars to do this, okay? And that system overall has worked really, really well. Okay. Years back, the wall was up in terms of credit cards. But as time went on, you know, you can't navigate in the modern world without a credit card. If you want to buy an airline ticket, if you want to reserve a hotel room, if you want to rent a car, you can't. So in fact, individuals today ask me, can I get a credit card? And I say, yeah, okay. And if an individual, and again, people coming in have had a credit card, so they already know how to use it. Early on, it was like funny money. It's like, yeah, you just use this, and yeah, it's great. And then the bill comes.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So we are trying constantly to protect the community of goods and to really have a sense of shared community goods, recognizing that in a contemporary economy it has its limits. Yeah, I hope that helps. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
I stepped out for a minute, so if this question has been addressed, then just say so and someone else can fill me in. You talked a little bit about questions of sexuality and how those do or don't play in. And I'm wondering about questions of gender when the monasteries are split by gender and the universities are split by gender and the prep schools are split by gender. For people who identify as trans or for people who identify just outside of the gender binary, do they fit in this community or how do they fit in?
They probably, we haven't faced the issue of a transgender person fitting into the monastic community, okay? From a church law point of view, there would be a real block there, okay? Within the university and within the prep school, in fact, we have had transgender students and have just dealt with it straight on, okay? So in terms of our schools, we've had to navigate that already, and we've got policies in place and ways to do it, okay? So, but within the monastery, that will be the day that one comes. Will be an interesting day. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Yes.
You have a really large job description that could take up all 24 hours of your day if you let it. How do you make space for your spiritual health?
Good question. Good question. So really have to be careful in terms of protecting parts of my day. So I protect the front end. I get up at 5, okay? And that front end, those hours before morning prayer, they're really for reading scripture, for prayer, for doing Lexio, okay? Later on, somewhere in the day, I will get physical exercise, one way or another, okay? It won't be long, it'll be 35 minutes, but it will be 35 minutes, okay? I protect the monastic horarium of prayer at 7, at midday, Mass at 5, evening prayer at 7. That's mine.
You're there with everyone.
I'm with it, yeah, exactly. Okay? And if I can slip in, and I really try to do this, I try to get it in the morning, but sometimes about three times a week now I'm teaching in the morning, teaching the rule. So, but I also try to get some sitting time in. Okay? Just what Zen would call just sitting. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
In contemplative silence. Okay. Does that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It just must take a lot of balance when you could spend the whole day in meetings.
Oh yeah. Disciplining the schedule is it's an art.
Yeah.
And I will never say that I've mastered it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the sexual abuse piece and about the accountability and reconciliation work that's been done, as well as like prevention work that's being done for the future? And I asked especially because I was a student at the prep school when a lot of that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my later life, we've dealt with a lot of that in Zen as well. So sexual abuse and abuse of sexual power in American Zen is a big problem as well. So
Thank you.
I'm doubly interested.
Yes. So a huge effort on prevention, starting already, I want to say about the first awareness, systemic awareness, I would say, on the part of Abbot Jerome was like beginning in 83 or 82, somewhere around there. The community itself, we started having workshops on this stuff about 86. So we have just all the way through then, through the 90s, and then intensively through the 2000s, have been working again, always on prevention, on recognizing, on overall relational health, just appropriate levels of affective awareness, in terms of, so Presidium, which is an outside external organization that specializes in helping other groups like the Boy Scouts, like YMCA, or any youth-serving organization, how to set up systems where, in fact, you minimize the possibility of the abuse of a minor. So we've been working with them since about 2004. Okay? But even before that time, we were doing a lot of serious work in terms of just really having good policies, knowing what to do. Key insight in the 1980s, up until that time, the abuse of a minor would have been treated within the church as, this is a failure of celibacy. A failure of celibacy and chastity. In the 70s, this is a developmental problem. It's a psychological problem. This person needs psychological help. About 1984 or so, no. This is a crime. This is a crime. It's a felony. And that's the first thing you treat. You got to deal with it on a legal level, and you got to go and deal with the legal system. Okay, that insight right there changes everything, doesn't it? Okay, and I think but it took a long time, I think, and it took for everybody to realize that that's the case. So, but prevention, we've done an enormous work and continue doing it. Boy, you want to talk about vigilance, you just got to be aware. Okay? Secondly, really working hard with individuals coming into the community in terms of, individuals who, how clear about who they are sexually, how well developed are they, what has been their sexual experience, have they ever been accused of being inappropriate with a minor. Okay. And then following that up with really good formation teaching with skilled professionals, okay, along the way. Okay? Very, very important, because as you're going through the monastic life, just like anything else, you just have to keep growing and developing. You cannot assume that because somebody was fine when they were a young monk, that 10 years later they're going to be okay as well, if you haven't done anything along the way. Okay. Responding to individuals. So it's our position, if anybody, we always offer to individuals, for myself or someone from the community that they would like to meet with. If they've come forward with an allegation and we've gone through a settlement process with that individual, then in fact we're willing to meet with them and willing to apologize. And willing, of course, we have a bias toward getting them help immediately. So if a case comes forward, if somebody comes forward with an allegation, before we've done any investigation or anything else, we will offer them therapeutic counseling. Offer them therapeutic help. Sometimes individuals want that and need that. Sometimes they're so doggone mad that they're not ready to do that yet, okay? Because they're saying, wait a minute, this is your issue. Why should I go to therapy because of something one of your guys did 25 years ago or 30 years ago? Okay. I always hope that individuals will get help. And finally, we had a 3-year window, I'm sure you're aware of it, from 2013 to 2016, okay, in which cases could come forward and be sued out in a court of law in the state of Minnesota. As a result, there are now, I want to say 900 or so cases in litigation in the state of Minnesota. That's a lot of cases. Okay? That's involving the Archdiocese, Diocese of St. Cloud, Crookston, New Ulm, St. John's Abbey, the Croziers, you name it, all of us, okay? As a result, the Archdiocese is in bankruptcy, so is Duluth, so is New Ulm, okay? When it goes legal, reconciliation becomes, in terms of forgiveness or reconciliation, very, very hard to get to, okay? Because until you've gotten through that legal process and resolved that part of it, starting to talk about the other piece, I don't think is really possible. But it is my deep hope, and I keep looking, listening, trying to be aware of what might be pathways for St. John's, for dioceses to achieve some kind of real solemn reconciliation. Not one time, because you'll never, it's too complicated, it's too messy, and people are at so many different places. But somehow to do the basic work that you'd expect religiously based places and communities to do. I mean, that's who we are. But that's how tough sexual abuse crisis is. It tends to undermine the very things that are at the heart of who we are. If that makes any sense. I mean, in the person who's been harmed, it smashes their understanding of who God is, what forgiveness means, what grace means. It just calls all of that theological language and all of the spiritual realities that they're trying to speak about, it really compromises those. And so you're trying to again retrieve those kinds of core meanings.
I have a question. I don't know how long we're gonna go. Are we about time to quit?
We can take a couple more questions.
A couple more questions. This has to do with your growth as a leader over time, from when you became Abbot to now. And maybe the shortest way to put this is, what 1, 2, or 3 things do you know about being a leader now that you didn't know when you were elected Abbot, that are key?
So I think initially one of the hardest things for me to deal with was Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Because I could count on something coming in, some horrible thing coming in over the transom that would just deck me, huh? Okay? And so one of the things I realized at a certain point was, Johnny, you just really can't worry about it. You really can't. And the reason you can't is because you just can't live in fear about what's going to come in over the transom. You got to have confidence that you're going to ultimately be able to get the right people in the room around the question to deal with it in an effective manner. And knowing who they are. Okay? So that was one really big insight. So that you just there. Okay? But the second thing is how to, when I'm stuck, is to realize, oh wow, I'm stuck. Who do I need to get in this room here to help me think about this? Because I'm not smart enough to think about this thing all by myself. I don't have the skill sets. Who are you going to call? And it was really, that was a second kind of fundamental insight along the way, and confidence in terms of the people I'm working with, etc. So solving those kinds of problems. A third is the insight of almost everybody, and myself included, overestimates how much you can do in a single year. Okay. Overestimates it. But we underestimate consistently how much we can do in 10. So taking the long range, no matter what that long range is, but taking the longer range, in fact, helps us to marshal resources and people and direction within the community in a way that's more productive. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's the old saw about the important and the urgent. So you're always having to make decisions about, oh, this seems really urgent, how important is it? And what's going to be important over 10 years?
My dad had a sign on his kitchen wall. He didn't have the front part of this because it's my own front beginning, or my own beginning to it. It's from Bernard Lonergan. Be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, be responsible. However, when you're up to your fanny and alligators, it's hard to remember that your initial objective was to drain the swamp. Humor works as well.
Well, just out of curiosity, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but if Vatican changes the rules on the priests marrying or allowing women to become deacons or maybe priests, I don't know if it's going to happen. Well, do you think that's going to help the community?
Actually,
it changes?
It won't have much of an impact on us, in the sense that the monastic tradition has always been and will continue to be, celibate and chaste, because that's at the core of the vocation. So we would continue to be that. The only way, and we could change that now in the sense of, although we want to be very careful with St. Ben's, but a double monastery,
Right.
there throughout history there are double monasteries where in fact you have men and women living side by side. Okay, so here we've got St. Ben's Monastery, St. John's Monastery, and with a lot of very good relationships between the two of us. So either one of us going in that direction seems unlikely, I would think. Unless the spirit moves. Who knows? Who knows? Good question, thank you.
I have another question, but I've asked a lot of questions already. So when you started off as a novice, did you think, oh, I'd like to be Abbot someday? Like, what I'm curious about is my question of, as you maybe found yourself moving or being encouraged or being moved into positions of greater responsibility, and like maybe when people actually started listening to things that you had to say, like, how did you make that transition? Like, what was that like for you?
Sure. Totally reasonable, good question, good question. So, I'm living my life, huh? I'm involved with ethics, teaching chemistry, but I was early on involved in an ethics program and then a peace studies program in the late 80s. Went away, retooled, went to Berkeley, had a great year, learned some new chemistry, came back, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, okay, in terms of chemistry. Full time.
Yeah.
Yeah, full bore, pedal to the metal, right? I come back in summer of 91. Spring of 92, Abbot Jerome called me in and said, I want you to be formation director. Just about knocked the wind right out of my stomach. I didn't see it coming at all. And then my heart was so set on doing chemistry, okay? Just to leave, because I knew that once I did that, it would pull me over into another whole set of things that are just, okay. I thought about it for a long time. I went in and talked to Jerome, and Jerome talked for 45 minutes, and I realized, oh wow, he's really serious. He didn't let me get a word in edgewise, okay? So then I thought, okay, I get this drill, okay. And I've been given a lot. So if he feels that passionately about it, I've got to say yes. Okay, so I did. And it was the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. So from 93 to 99, I was the formation director for the community, which meant that I was walking with individuals who were making a decision. I was talking to the community, regularly presenting them, getting more comfortable. They were seeing me, so they were getting a look of me. What does John do when he's asked really pointed, hard questions? Okay. How does he manage and work with individuals who are having a hard time? Etc. All those kinds of questions, okay? So I finished that up. I went to the U of M and I retooled as a chemist.
Again.
And so I got home in summer of 2000, and individuals started approaching me and saying, well, John, because we don't campaign here, okay? If your name were to be put in as a candidate for Abbot, would you keep your name on the ballot? Now that's a game-changing question. Because if you say no, okay, that's one answer. If you say yes and then later on say no, that's not fair. That's not fair. So I thought about that long and hard. But ultimately I said, well, if the community wants to elect me as Abbot, again, I've received a lot from this community, and I will serve. Okay. So, in fact, in November of 2000, I was elected. Okay. But that's the way that discernment kind of happened. Okay. I was pretty confident in October that they were going to look for somebody who was going to serve for about 6 to 7 years or so. And it was only after the first nomination ballot that I realized, Johnny, you're in deep trouble.
So when you finish your term, are you gonna go retool yourself in
No, I'm not going to. No.
Third try?
It feels to me like you've been doing chemistry between human beings for a long,
Yeah,
very
right.
successful
Oh, yeah,
career.
you know, the whole field of metaphors just works in another
Doesn't it?
realm.
Yeah.
I often kid people, I say, you know, look, I grew up on a farm, and I've worked in the lab and done some science, so I have metaphors from two very powerful fields.
Abbot John, we are so grateful that you opened up our program this evening. And I'd ask the fellows to join me in offering our thanks to you.
No.